Good evening to all of those joining us this evening. We are just going to give it a couple of minutes for people to be checked in. Looking forward to having a really good event tonight. We've got a number of people attending, so it should be really a good opportunity to hear both from Ben Willmott and also have some good discussion and conversation at points as well. So we will just give it a couple of minutes for people to be checked through in the admin process. For those of you who want to be aware, we are recording the event this evening. That's just so that we can allow it to be streamed afterwards. Questions will be submitted through Mentimeter, so they will be anonymous anyway. But if you do have any concerns about the recording, then just please make it known to my colleagues in the chat. Make a start with the presentation, and obviously as colleagues can be continuing to attend, my great colleagues and ambassadors from the CIPD Manchester Branch and managing that process for us this evening. So welcome to the event. This event looks at the issue of public policy and, more importantly, how policy is shaping the future of work. We're lucky to be joined this evening by Ben. Ben Willmott is the head of policy at CIPD, based in London with his team there. Ben's team work to inform and shape debates, government policy and legislation in order to enable higher performance at work and better pathways into work for those seeking employment. Ben's going to be speaking to us shortly, but we just have some initial welcoming and housekeeping to undertake. So, in terms of all the housekeeping, and welcome to those who continue to join us this evening, we're going to be muting microphones centrally, and we'll be using Mentimeter to facilitate the 2 polls that we're running and also some Q&A sessions. Slides will be shared with you after the event. We've got 2 ambassadors on hand tonight. We've got Rebecca and Rhoda, both supporting, and they will be monitoring the chat function. So if you're having any issues technically or otherwise, please do just make them aware of it. Feel free to tweet whilst we're going through or after the event using our hashtag CIPD Manchester. So Mentimeter, we've got a couple of ways that you can access it, either on your phone or on your desktop. You can go to the website using that specific code, and that code will reappear on the slides where you can get interactive. You can also just use the QR code there and it will take you directly to the slides that we're going to be using, or you can use the link as well. So welcome tonight. We're going to go through a quick Zoom toolbar, although I think we're all quite adept with Zoom and Teams and other platforms these days. We've got a quick poll, then we go into Ben's session. We've got sections then in terms of how policy is applied in practice, some information about the Manchester Branch's public policy group. We've got some case studies of how that group has impacted on policy determination. And we've got the ways that you could use CIPD policy resources to improve your career or your studies. You then have an option to ask me any questions as we get to the end as well. So your Zoom toolbar then, obviously you can highlight this by following to the bottom of your screen, and you've got options there in terms of seeing the chat, in terms of putting forward any reactions, and also being able to view properly. So we have our first poll here, and I would like people to get involved and interact. Hopefully my colleagues have put the links to the Mentimeter in the chat for you, but if you have any issues, then do shout up. So we're asking people to vote on which of the issues that you are seeing there will fall under public policy. So if you want to just submit your votes there, the results are currently hidden. So the results we'll show you shortly, but we're asking you to tell us which of these matters would be considered to fall under public policy. Would there be gender pay gap reporting, levelling up, Brexit, the labour market, sick pay, immigration, family leave and pay, or would it be all of the above? So interested to see what people will be saying. And you can see there that we've got 4 people who've correctly identified that it is all of the above. So as you can see, it's just an indicator of how many different areas of HR practice will fall under the area of public policy. Oh, here we go then. The main lead for our evening is Ben Willmott. So as I've said previously in the introduction, he's the head of public policy at CIPD. Ben is just attending the first segment of this session, so please do prepare to enter your questions into Mentimeter, and we can make sure that he answers those. He does have to leave, unfortunately, due to other commitments, but he's here for the first half of the presentation. So please do think of any questions you might want to ask and get them loaded into Mentimeter. Ben, I'll hand over to you, and when you're ready, you can let me know when you want me to change slides for you.
Thanks so much, Emma. And yeah, very pleased to be here talking about public policy. Obviously, I think everything is overshadowed by events happening in Ukraine at the moment, but nonetheless, you know, we have to continue to focus on some of those sort of key policy agendas, of course, that are critical to the UK's future economic success as well. So yeah, what I'll try and do is just give you a sort of a quick overview of some of the sort of key areas of public policy that are really material to CIPD, to HR and people professionals, and how organisations are able to to boost their investment in skills and improve their productivity, create more inclusive and productive jobs. So I suppose a good place to start is the government's Levelling Up white paper. This was published last month, long-awaited paper, which is designed to highlight how government policy, changes to government policy and investment can address some of the economic disparities in the UK. So trying to make sure that other regions outside London and the southeast have equitable levels of growth and opportunity. And I think the paper, in overview, I think certainly its ambition is to be applauded. It sets out 12 key missions around levelling up, around education, skills, pay, productivity, and crime, for example, and with some sort of targets around these, around how if there should be improvements in these areas by 2020. But I think the difficulties and the analysis is very good in terms of the problem, but the difficulties lie with the sort of the lack of substance around or change to around long-standing fault lines in public policy, particularly around skills. So the paper says that skills are a key factor in deciding economic disparities at a regional level. But then actually, if you look at what it says on skills policy, it fails to address what we know are long-standing fault lines. So for example, the Apprenticeship Levy. We know that in the 4 years since the Apprenticeship Levy, or nearly 5 years soon, it has been in place, we've seen a consistent fall in the number of apprenticeships, and a fall in the number of apprenticeships going to young people in particular. We've also seen an overall fall in employer investment in skills over that time. So on every measure, it seems to be failing, and it's such a key policy that it will continue to undermine employer investment in skills in England, certainly, but also we know that employers in Scotland are unhappy with how the Scottish government is using the levy funds they receive as well. So there's significant problems there. We know big problems with career advice and guidance. We produced some research recently which showed that nearly half of young people aged 18 to 21 rated that the quality of career advice and guidance that they received while they were at school as being either poor or non-existent. And this is really important because this is a key moment at which young people make decisions about their qualifications and the sorts of jobs that they might go into. And so, again, that's something that has to be addressed. We have high levels of skills mismatch in the UK, overqualification, and certainly poor careers advice and guidance is feeding into that. And then also the paper highlights it rests its skills around response around further education with the existing plans. I'll come on to these a bit later, to try and put employers at the heart of the FE system, which certainly something we'd all want to see, but actually how the government is planning to do this is inadequate. So real problems around skills. And then on pay and productivity, the main component of the paper rests on improving R&D investment outside London and South East. And of course, we know R&D investment is crucial, but its benefits tend to be quite narrow. Quite often, sorry, let me rephrase that. The benefits of R&D investment can sometimes only spread to certain sectors or larger employers. And so the bigger challenge is, how do you encourage and support more firms across all sectors to improve how they manage people, how they invest in technology and skills to improve their productivity. So again, a big problem around that agenda. So I think, certainly that's an area where we are going to be highlighting some of our calls around improving the quality of business support, particularly around HR for small firms at a regional level, to try and build capability around HR and people management. I've touched on so that's sort of the levelling up white paper. In terms of skills policy, there have been two major government publications in the last 6 months. There was the further education white paper, which was published in the autumn of 2021, and then just recently, last week, the government published its response to the Augur review of post-18 education and funding. And there's a few issues that have come out of these publications. So if we look at the Augur review announcements last week, some of the major changes are that student loan repayment period is going to be, for higher education, is going to be extended from 30 to 40 years, and the threshold at which graduates have to start paying back their loan has been dropped from just over 27,000 to 25,000. So that's designed to reduce the level of unpaid debt around the student loan system. There's also going to be a consultation on a minimum qualification requirement for people to access loans. And this is quite controversial because potentially this could restrict people's ability to go to university, and could disproportionately affect those from economically disadvantaged backgrounds. So I think that's going to be quite controversial. There was also a consultation on a new lifelong learning loan entitlement. And I think this looks quite interesting. This is designed to enable people to access funding around lifelong learning over the course of their working lives. So it means that you can access the equivalent of 4 years of post-18 study, either full-time or modular, at different stages of your working life. So in principle, you know, I think it's really positive. There's a consultation on that, and we will be responding to that, because I think that's going to be, you know, really key to you know, supporting lifelong learning, and which is, as we know, going to be more and more important as a result of our aging workforce and the impact of technology on workplaces, which means more people are going to need to reskill and upskill at different stages of their working lives. So that's skills. Flexible working. I'm sure you all have been aware of the government's flexible working consultation closed just before Christmas. We are expecting the government response. I would say probably maybe later this month, possibly April. We shall see. I think the expectation is that the right to request flexible working will become a day one right, and there will be some changes to how the legislation operates, in terms of potentially meaning that employers have to respond more quickly to flexible working requests, and potentially, you know, the employees will be able to make more than one request a year, for example. I think the criticism of these proposals has been they don't go far enough. The TUC, I'll come back. Thanks, Sue. I'll come back to that. I'll pick that up at the end, Sue. Sorry. The criticism of the extending the right to request flex working is that it's not gone far enough from stakeholders, for example, such as the TUC, and they would like there to be not just a right to request flex working, but a day one right to flexible working, which would also mean that employers would have a legal duty to advertise jobs as flexible, and then to give people the right to those jobs on day one of employment. I think the problem with this is that it would be very easy for employers to avoid if they wanted to, and impossible for EHRC to enforce. I won't go on. I'm happy to have that discussion later if anyone's interested in that discussion. We're also currently looking at a consultation on disability workforce reporting. So this is looking at whether large employers should be required to report annually on the disability profile of their workforce, and their sort of pay and progression of people with disabilities in their workforce, whether this should be a voluntary or mandatory approach. So that's going to be interesting to see what the views from members are, and we're consulting with by a number of focus groups currently on that. We're also first half, we're expecting at some point during the first half of this year the government to respond to the Commission for Race and Ethnic Disparities, with the big question will be whether or not they follow the Commission's recommendation that ethnicity pay reporting should be voluntary, or whether it should be mandatory. And I think, I mean, our view is that it probably needs to be mandatory if it's to have any effect. And we, recognise that it's complex, and there are some challenges around that, but nonetheless, we do think that it would really shine a light on issues around inequality and how and where employers need to make changes to improve practice. Then we're also waiting for the employment bill. This seems to have been kicked into the long grass. It was very much part of the Queen's speech, this government's Queen's speech, when it came to power, and Some of the areas that the government said it would legislate are leave for carers, a right for variable hours workers to request a stable or more predictable contract, and enhanced redundancy protection for women and new parents. So we're still, government is, and we speak to civil servants on this quite regularly, and they're not sure themselves, because this is down to ministers on whether this whether, when and if the employment bill is taken forward. And as part of that, we're waiting for more detail about the creation of a single enforcement body, which is part of the government's plan to, in theory, significantly improve labour market enforcement in the UK. I think there are some question marks about that. Again, happy to talk about labour market enforcement, really interesting area, if people are interested after at questions at the end. Next slide, please. Thanks, Emma. And I won't dwell too long on this slide. I'm conscious I don't want to speak for too long, and it'd be great to have the opportunity to take any questions and have any discussion that people would like. But big issue I think is that macro one of industrial strategy, skills policy, and productivity. The government abolished its industrial strategy council last year and doesn't seem to have an industrial strategy of any sorts at the moment. The levelling up paper does not set out an industrial strategy. It's a series of rifle shot policy initiatives with very little coherent narrative or overview or understanding of how the different areas of policy are connected. So I think we think there's a real need for a coherent industrial strategy for the UK. I've mentioned the Apprenticeship Levy and some of the other reforms around FE policy. I noticed we got a question on those Trailblazers, so I'll pick that up in a minute. Careers advice and guidance. We are going to be giving evidence shortly to the Education Select Committee inquiry onto careers advice and guidance. And as I said before, this is an area I think is so critical. Careers advice and guidance has been poor in the UK for years. I remember when I was 16, I did one of those early computer programs where you put in all your sort of aptitudes and strengths and interests, and it came out with one suggestion for me, which was zookeeper. And I love animals, but I never really wanted to be a zookeeper, and I couldn't quite work out how it comes to that conclusion. But I don't actually think it's improved that much for lots of people. But anyway, that's an area that I'm quite keen for CIPD to do some more work on, and I think it's not just careers advice and guidance for young people. Increasingly we need better careers advice and guidance for people at all stages of their working lives. That's going to become more and more important as more people need to make decisions about changing jobs or upskilling or reskilling at different stages of their working lives. We continue to support various regional good work charters. Happy to discuss those if people are interested. And we continue to highlight some of the insights from the pilots we've run around providing HR support for small firms. We see that critical as part of an industrial strategy to, if the UK is to move to a high wage, high skill economy. We're just about to publish a piece of work, actually hopefully next week, on workforce reporting. So we've done an evaluation of FTSE 100 companies' workforce reporting, and it shows just how poor really the quality of reporting around skills, diversity, employment relations and well-being, reward and recognition is, even amongst these large publicly listed firms. And the problem with that is that if these issues aren't being disclosed, it's very difficult for investors or other stakeholders to really understand how organizations are investing in their workforce, and how they're doing that, and the extent they really do value their people. And then I won't, the other areas I just thought I'd pick out: statutory sick pay reform, menopause in the workplace, employment status reform, employment rights. These are all areas that we have work either relevant and existing advocacy around, or where we're looking to develop more viewpoints or evidence on. So I'll leave it there, Emma. Very happy to take questions on anything. Sorry, Emma, I think you're muted.
Sorry, Ben, I've got 2 questions on the chat. Sorry, yes.
So let me have a look. Sorry. Yeah. So Sue, thank you. So the levy. I mean, we've been we've probably now done about 4 pieces of research with members on the levy, and what both, not just member research, but we've looked at apprenticeship data and other survey data to look at the effect of the levy on employer investment in apprenticeships and skills more broadly. And what employers tell us is that it leads to really unproductive behavior, such as basically rebadging training as apprenticeships in order to, not always, but in some cases, so that companies can benefit, reclaim from their levy, from the levy pot, and it also means that for example, so if you look at the proportion of levy funding which is now going on different forms of management apprenticeships, that is just it's now running into hundreds of thousands a year. And I mean, our view is that we're not saying you should ban management apprenticeships. If an employer thinks that a management apprenticeship is the best way to develop their managers, then they should pay for that off their own bat. That shouldn't be, public funding shouldn't be used for to subsidize expensive management apprenticeships, which usually go to already well qualified managers. And the problem is that as more money goes to those sorts of apprenticeships, less money is going to young people, to apprenticeships for young people to develop badly needed technical skills. So I think that's just one problem. And as I said before, the data around apprenticeship starts show that they've fallen pretty much in every year since the levy's been in place, and overall investment in employee investment in skills has fallen at the same time. So it's very difficult to see how the levy is doing anything more than damage to employer investment in skills and in apprenticeships. On the Trailblazers, these are there are a number of Trailblazers which have been set up to see how what are called local skills improvement plans can work in practice. And so these are designed to try and improve the links between employers and further education providers at a regional level, so that the sorts of courses and qualifications that further education colleges provide are more aligned with what employers actually need. So in principle, the direction of travel is absolutely right. The government's been trying to do this for the last 20 years. There's been different approaches with the same ambition, and they've never managed it. And the problem with the Trailblazers, I mean, we're supporting as far as we can. The chambers of commerce are, I think there's about 8 which are being supported by different chambers of commerce. But we've worked with chambers of commerce before, and they're very good bodies, but they're not great at they don't have the capacity to bring employers together in large numbers and meaningfully engage with FE. So I mean, our view is you need this is where we think there needs to be that sort of central business support service to particularly around HR and people management, because one of the problems is that a lot, most small and medium-sized companies, they don't even know what their skills gaps are until they've spoken to an expert. A lot of them don't have in-house HR expertise, and so they are really flailing in the darkness if they're just talking to an education or training provider. They need additional support in order to do that in an informed way. So I think that's why we think there's quite a lot more thinking needed about how the FE reforms can actually be made to work in practice.
Thank you, Ben. I hope, can you hear me now?
Yes.
Super, thank you. So hopefully you can see the question that's come up from a delegate about lifelong learning.
Yeah, I don't know enough yet about this, I'm afraid. So my colleague Lizzie leads on skills, and we haven't. I mean, I was on leave next week, so I haven't actually read the consultation yet. But we will be responding to the consultation. Yeah, I mean, I think those are really good questions. Mm-hmm. And I think the problem is that one of the challenges is going to be how do you encourage people who for who their experience of school and education was not a positive one. How do you encourage them to invest in learning or training? Because it might make sense, for people who've been reasonably successful in getting qualifications, but for those who need it most, will this type of lifelong learning loan, will it really resonate with them? So I think there's some real challenges around how it's promoted, and how you can increase uptake amongst those who most need it. But very, very happy to connect offline on this, and if you're particularly interested, and to connect you with Lizzie Crowley, who's our skills lead on this.
Thanks, Ben. Just a quick question. You mentioned the consultation on the disability reporting. As a practitioner who's sort of had a number of years' experience in looking at the data, I would go as far as to say it's fairly common to see a lot of under-reporting and under-disclosure in that area. Is that a factor that maybe is coming through the focus groups that you're hearing so far, and will that form part of the response to the consultation?
Yeah, no, very much so. I think that that is a significant challenge, and it's around how do you build confidence and so that more people are comfortable disclosing. And I think the other thing is that some people won't necessarily see themselves as having a disability, even though they may actually be covered by the Equality Act. So I think there are some questions about how do you really improve disclosure levels, and so that the data is meaningful.
Yeah, I completely agree. It's a really difficult one to try and address. We did have one question that was submitted by somebody prior to the event, and that person asked if upskilling and reskilling might become more compulsory with public sector companies in a tight labour market in the UK. I don't know if you were able to speak to that, Ben.
Well, I don't know about becoming compulsory, but I do think it will become a completely non-negotiable. I think it's going to be something where the public sector can really compete for talent in terms of providing opportunities for training, development, and progression. And I think but also I think it's about how your employment offer, how you attract staff. We know increasingly that flexibility is going to be critical to whether people decide to join an organisation or not. The ONS published a survey yesterday to try and explore why over 50s had disproportionately left the labour market in the pandemic, and the three, when asked the sort of which aspects of a job what are the sort of top aspects of a job that would encourage you to come back to employment, the top three were flexible working, the ability to work from home, and a job that I can fit around caring responsibilities. So so I think it's going to be the overall employment proposition that will decide the employers which are successful in combating skill and labour shortages.
Yes, and that's going to be a real challenge. And I speak to a number of universities as part of my day job, and recruitment and retention is a real challenge, I think, across the piece. Just perhaps one more question from me. If anybody does have any more questions for Ben, then please do pop them in the Mentimeter. Ben is going to be leaving us after this segment. So one of the things we'll be talking about in the next half of the session is how practitioners and members from across the different regions can get involved in the work of your team. And I just wondered if you could speak to that and tell us about how voice and representation of CIPD members across the country factors into your team's work and the responses to government.
Yeah, I mean, it's becoming more and more important, and certainly I think CIPD has invested in its staff in order to do that. So we now have more capacity in terms of CIPD leads in CIPD North, Scotland, Northern Ireland, and Wales. I mean, I would say that the groups such as the Manchester Branch have always been incredibly useful in terms of generating member insight, and we're trying to replicate that more widely. So I think some of the policy groups that we now have, like the Northern Policy Group, is hopefully providing more of a forum for members to engage and to influence CIPD thinking. Because I mean, the reason why government is interested in engaging with stakeholders like the CIPD is because of our membership, because HR practitioners really understand the impact of policies around flexible working or skills or employment regulation on the ground, and so we depend on those practitioner insights. It's absolutely critical, and increasingly that regional context is more and more important. As skills becomes more devolved, skills policy becomes more involved, those combined authority areas become have much more ability to influence policy themselves, which some are doing as well through the good work charters and agendas. So I think it's a direction of travel that's only going to become more important. Take another example. We're with CIPD Wales. We're holding a big one-day event with members and the Welsh government, looking at how to help disadvantaged groups into employment in a couple of weeks. So those are the sorts of things we want to do to engage more with members and where we can connect you directly with policymakers. And what I would say is we're also always keen to speak to people individually. So if anyone wants to drop me or any member of the team an email or to have a phone call, we're always very happy to talk to members individually, because it's really useful to talk to individual practitioners as well. So if any of you have particular areas of policy that you're interested in, or you think the things that CIPD is should have a louder voice on, or where we need where our policy call is slightly off, then we want to talk to you. So yeah, always very keen to talk to members.
Thanks, Ben. We do have a couple more questions now. I know you're strapped for time to maybe some just brief responses to those.
Yes,
so
sure.
Firstly is about the statutory sick pay reform and how that might come through, and whether there's any discussions on supporting employees with IVF as part of that.
But yeah, great questions. I mean, statutory sick pay. Yeah, we put out a paper at the beginning of this year where we made a number of recommendations to improve and increase statutory sick pay, and government has for the moment kicked it into the long grass, but it's at a time when, and I don't think reform to statutory sick pay has ever been more important. Now, while we all get used to living with COVID, you know, if people you know can't afford not to take time off if they're sick, you know, that is not a you know a sustainable situation. So we will continue to push on that, and you know, I'm optimistic that, you know, we will get it back on the agenda sooner rather than later. On IVF, we are actually doing sorry, I've got a fog in my throat. We are doing a piece of work currently looking at issues around fertility support and pregnancy loss. So we're again, if people have got particular interests in that, I can connect you to our policy advisors who are leading on that work.
Thank you for that. Next, we've got a question about any other regions that are looking to launch or expected to launch a good employment charter.
Well, the Southwest is certainly one, and then you've got East Yorkshire. I think it's East Yorkshire as well. So, and Liverpool has launched one, but it's been a slightly difficult launch. I think they've been a bit premature on launching it without really thinking through the resources needed and really not engaging employers sufficiently. So you know, there is real interest in these good work, good employment charters, and you know, we are very supportive of them. The only thing I would say is that they need to be integrated with you know, good quality business support around HR and people management, because what often happens is that you know, good employers sort of gravitate towards these good work charters because it's a way of you know, sort of accrediting their existing good employment practices. But actually the you know, the SMEs, you know, who've limited resources and capability around HR and people management, the ones who actually need you know to move up the value chain most on people management, they're the ones who don't tend to engage with these charters. So I think you need to sort of, you know, provide some free support, some pump priming HR support to, you know, to help small firms and to incentivize small firms to engage with these sorts of charters.
Thank you so much. And one final quick question is how the CIPD advises employers around improving social mobility.
Yeah, it's again another really important agenda. We are working quite closely with the Social Mobility Commission on this issue, and there's going to be a tool out soon around you know, what are the key areas that employers can focus on around recruitment, flexible working, you know, line management capability, and training and development and you know, progression. So yeah, and the other thing we've got coming up is the UK Working Lives Survey has a focus on social mobility this year. So we will be at the moment, you know, it hasn't been confirmed, but I'm hoping we'll be putting out a separate report on social mobility in the workplace, drawing on that good work data, because it's a really important issue. And I think one of the challenges is, you know, how you integrate a focus on improving social mobility within your wider inclusion and diversity strategy, rather than seeing it as a bolt-on, because actually, you know, a lot of the sort of practices that support inclusion and diversity in terms of wider and more inclusive recruitment approaches, flexible working, investment in training development, high quality line management, people management, that recognises people's strengths and supports their development. These are sort of common factors that support all forms of inclusion. So I think that's one area we would also be looking at is, from an employer perspective, how when you're looking at social mobility, how do you think about issues like intersectionality and how do you integrate that agenda within your wider approach to I&D?
Super. Well, thank you so much for your time, Ben. That there was a comment, perhaps not a question. Somebody's marked it as that just says it would be great if those good employers could mentor organisations to make improvements to reach the standards. I think that's something we'd all endorse. But thank you, Ben, so much for your time. It's really important to have you here and to provide those updates that your team are delivering, and as always we welcome any opportunity to engage with those and see how we can have our voice as a region heard in London. So thank you very much for your time.
Well, thanks very much, Emma, and I'm always happy to come and talk, and as I said, I'm very happy to talk individually to members as well if they have any questions after the event.
Great, thank you so much, Ben. We'll be seeing you soon. Bye.
Thanks, Em. Bye.
Okay, so thank you for those who've obviously contributed to those questions. We'll be moving through the session now, which offers opportunities to look at some examples of how policy has been working in practice and how you can get involved with your voice, or how you can use the CIPD's resources on policy to improve your career and studies. If you missed it at the start, a quick introduction. My name's Emma Brookes and I'm the CIPD co-vice chair and policy lead. So I've been looking after policy for a number of years, and we do have quite a well-established group. So just looking at some of the areas of policy in practice, and these are areas that have been covered in the press recently with Ben and his team, looking at ethnicity pay reporting and skills and levelling up. One of the things that is very timely at the moment is the CIPD support for HR in Ukraine. Ben and his team have put some of that together, and one of the statements from Ben actually said that in terms of supporting employees, employers might want to consider flexibility over working hours or requests for time off, which can help employees who are balancing competing demands, and that at this time organisations should be prepared to provide compassionate support if staff are affected either by bereavement or anything else as a result of the conflict. We will share a link to that piece of work at the end, or you can connect with me on LinkedIn, and I shared it yesterday. So just moving on from that then, the Manchester Special Interest Group in relation to policy. We've been running since about 2013. Prior to the pandemic, we were running around 2 or 3 events a year. And these were options for Ben and his team to come up to Manchester, deliver a bit of a development session, and then engage usually in a roundtable discussion on the matters at hand in the consultation, so that practitioners could give their own views and experiences of how the issues were impacting on the ground. Since the pandemic, that has been slightly difficult because Ben and his team have been running through consultations that have been happening at very high speed, so difficult to get involved in that way. But we obviously hope that as Ben mentioned, there's a lot of consultation hopefully coming out of the long grass and back into practice. So we hope to engage in those as soon as possible. So with the special interest group, what we do is we have the 3 forms really of consultation. We look to be an established voice for Greater Manchester, and we have had an impact on policy development. It's really rewarding when we see some of the work that comes through, the consultation responses submitted by CIPD, and there are comments in there that I am well aware came from our group. We always look to have some kind of expert speaker to deliver a bit of learning as well as the roundtable discussion, or we look to invite pioneering organisations who are doing something a bit different in that space. We always want the events to have a lot of participation, so it's opportunities to share best practice and obviously give that networking and connection opportunity. So we've got a couple of examples here in terms of case studies where you can see from the events that we held in person pre-COVID, roundtable discussions on the subjects of immigration and the Good Work Charter, and those were then delivered in terms of the immigration white paper and the Good Charter for Greater Manchester. One of the questions that often gets asked in terms of policy is how it can be used, what does it inform? And I think there's a number of ways, if people are studying or if people are actually in practice, that the resources are really valuable for. So the different elements that can be used, there's the data and the analysis, the practitioner experience, sharing those best practices between one another to offer that in innovation, and being very aware of the future legislation that may be coming to impact on your business. How you might apply it if you're a student, then that could be in your assignment, exam and dissertation. But there are obviously the other benefits and advantages of being aware of the most common and prevalent issues of the day in terms of job hunting and being a strong candidate at interview. The resources on hand then, so we've got a couple of things that are on the CIPD website. Obviously, you can follow CIPD policy as a separate Twitter handle, and then the separate areas on the CIPD website are policy consultation, press release. If you sign up for CIPD Voice, that will tell you how public policy at the CIPD is representing members' interests at the higher level. And that's put together by a team of policy experts. So each issue gives you a really good overview of the work of the policy team and the latest developments in the world of work. That's every 2 months as well. In terms of the other areas where CIPD can support members and colleagues who are experiencing issues in relation to this, I just want to remind people that there are all the helplines, and that's both the employment law. There is a separate whistleblower helpline. For those who might have seen, there is a current review underway in terms of the CIPD Code of Conduct. And one of the elements that comes through loud and clear in that review is the opportunity for members to ensure that ethical practice is being delivered and to raise concerns through the CIPD's Code of Conduct team so that any malpractice can be addressed. There's also a personal legal helpline and the wellbeing helpline. In terms of supporting career development, there is the opportunity to access the CIPD Career Hub. You can see all the tools there. There is also a new learning hub, and there's the opportunity to build your career and get access to the careers clinic where you can get advice and guidance. At CIPD Manchester, we are looking, one of our vision elements is to be a career partner for people at every stage of their career, and we do want to make sure that our events and efforts do address that. So it's over to you to ask if you have any questions for me. I am happy to take questions both in terms of the subjects we've discussed, in terms of the Manchester Special Interest Group, and any potential future events that you feel would be helpful for us to deliver. I'm not able to see the chat, so I'll just be grateful if anybody can let me know if anything's coming through in there.
Nothing for the moment, Emma.
Nothing for the moment. Okay. Rebecca, can you, have you got any questions you think might be relevant for people to hear?
Oh, sorry, I put one forward earlier, and that was to do with employees and support for any going through IVF.
Yes. So obviously Ben's asked it from that perspective. I think it might be interesting to know if this is an area where there could be an angle for us to deliver some specific content, and perhaps look at innovative organisations that are delivering support either for IVF or related areas. I know there's a lot of movement recently in terms of supporting menopause in the workplace, and various organisations can provide that kind of support. I would be interested to hear if anyone wants to add it as a question or a comment as to whether there is an appetite for CIPD to be delivering something in the space of IVF support, if that's something that our members would be looking for us to deliver.
Yes, we've had a comment through from Claire, who put that question forward following her own challenge with this in the workplace. So that's perhaps something that we can follow up offline.
Definitely. Yeah, we can take that away offline. As I said, if somebody's interested in looking at the work CIPD are doing, then they can certainly put that forward to Ben and his team. But we would be interested to hear if there is a wider need for that in the business areas. So if there's no questions, obviously we've got the opportunity to proceed. I do just have another poll where I'm just going to hide results. So be interested to know what people feel about public policy after the session that Ben's delivered, whether you have a better understanding of policy than you did previously. Again, you can just log into Mentimeter and use the event code or the original QR code that we provided. But if you want to just respond to that poll to say how you feel about your understanding of public policy, has Ben's presentation made that a bit clearer? Do you feel that you're actually able to apply the public policy resources to your studies or career development? And maybe that's a question for us then as to how we can make that more accessible and make people more aware of what there is to find. And then finally, if you're interested in getting involved in supporting the CIPD's policy work, as Ben mentioned, we've got a number of developments in this space, and one of them is the Northern Policy Forum. So the policy leads from the different branches across the Northern region are getting together to firstly to see that events and efforts and resources in the area of policy are made available to our Northern members, but also to facilitate and create some events where people can get more involved in providing a voice. So if you are interested in that, you can contact me, or you can just pop your details in the chat function and we'll make sure that you're directed to that as and when events become available down the line. So we've got a number of people who've responded, so I'm just going to show those results, and that's a good it is a good dynamic to see that people are feeling they have a better understanding of policy, and also that people really want to get involved. From my perspective, people have asked why I volunteer with the CIPD in the policy space, and I've always had this view that you can't really just complain about something unless you're prepared to get involved and change it. So I know that there might be some legislation that's coming down the way, and it makes me feel better as a HR practitioner if I feel I've had some kind of voice in influencing or shaping that legislation. So that's why I do it. Like I say, I'll look to share after this event some more information on the areas where people can get involved. And if you follow me, then you'll obviously see any events that we put through the Manchester branch. I can see we've had a question put through, so I'm prepared to take that. So in terms of bereavement, do you see a time when policy would be related to pets? Some companies do already adopt this and some laugh it off. Is it important to recognise pets as family members? Well, you're asking me, and I have an adorable 2-year-old cockapoo, so I might be a bit biased to my own situation. I do know, I believe it was Brewdog Dog, who have been innovative in this space in recognising it. It is a challenge, and I know as a HR practitioner, I've dealt with quite a number of colleagues who've been bereaved, and for them their pet is their family member. So I'm not sure it's going to see a movement. Generally, it does seem to be something that might just be for niche organisations, but if you have any voice in your organisation and that's an important issue for you, then you might want to raise that and see if there is an appetite to deliver something. I haven't seen it in any of the organisations I've worked in, but I do think it's a genuine issue, and I would be devastated if anything happened to my Shelby. So there's no more questions on there. So we do have a couple of things. It does look like we'll be finishing a bit earlier than expected. But before we go, we do have a feedback form. Of course, we have a feedback form that we really would appreciate your input in terms of how the session has run tonight, how you think we could improve it, and what we could do differently. That will be sent to you, or you could just use the QR code that's currently on the screen in order to get direct access to that. I'm just going to ask Rebecca, our ambassador this evening, to come in and give us some information about events that are taking place across the Greater Manchester CIPD calendar.
Hello, everybody. Yes, if we could just, if you want to just take a screenshot of the QR code, you will have access to our online program of activities, which also includes resources from past events. So that can be slides, that can be recordings, sorry. And if you can just go to the next slide, Emma.
Yep.
Thank you. I'll just run through very quickly. I realise that's a little bit small. We have, for anybody who's in a senior role here or chartered fellow, for International Women's Day, we have an event at 8:30 in the morning on the 8th of March. And that is Pay Transparency, the answer to gender pay equality. So that will be sharing research with you and then asking for your views on UK gender pay reporting measures and the EU's proposed Pay Transparency Directive. Later on in March, we have 3 employment law sessions. So the first one, recent and forthcoming changes, as well as case law development. So that's important for everybody to be up to date on that. We have another session, either for beginners or for those who would just like a bit of a refresher. So we'll go through the key aspects of employment legislation and why it matters. We then have another session on managing allegations or complaints of sexual harassment. And that will be particularly interesting for those who may find that they need to constructively challenge their senior leaders if their company culture is such that some changes need to be made. So our law firm partner, Mills and Reeve in Manchester, will be taking us through clear steps on how to follow, in the event of an allegation or a complaint. We've got a brand new event coming up, which is financial wellbeing for you and your teams. And that is with James Kelly from the Money and Pensions Advisory Service. So he'll be giving the most up-to-date insights, interactive tools and independent support for employers and employees. So that's one not to miss. Big shout out then to the 31st of March at 6 o'clock. We have an inclusion and diversity panel discussion with thought leaders and our chief executive at CIPD, Peter Cheese. So we've got some great names on the panel there if you're interested in that. For any students that are with us or those in the very first stages of their career, the CIPD Annual Student Conference is on the 2nd of April, and that's from 9 in the morning until 3:30, again with wonderful speakers. There'll be lots of organisational case studies, panel discussions, and learning sessions where they'll be addressing some of the big workplace themes. And then finally, on the 6th of April, we've got our HR book club. And this time we are welcoming the authors of Neurodiversity at Work. So that's Professor Amanda Kirby and Theo Smith. So if you'd like to come along to that, read the book, and then come along with your thoughts, and then we'll work in small breakout rooms to discuss particular questions. So that's always an interesting event. CIPD members, 20% discount if you buy the book through the CIPD bookshop. There's a 5% discount for non-members, and you receive that code upon booking. Otherwise, you are free to go and look to buy the book through other sellers, maybe find a used copy. I don't think the book is in public libraries at the moment, but there we go. That's what we have lined up for March and the beginning of April.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Rebecca.
Sure.
I do have an opportunity here because we've got extra time and we don't normally in this space. I think Ben's gone through a bit quicker than he does normally. But I would like to open it up potentially if we, I'll stop sharing, and if you would like to leave, because this is an ad lib, non-planned section of the session. So if you've had what you came for and you'd like to leave, that's fine. Rebecca, would you like to stop the recording at this point?
I will do.
And I would just extend an opportunity if anybody wants to stay